How's it going, Summoners? My name is Nathaning, and I'm so happy to see you guys all again. I'll be your host for our patch 11.14 rundown, and in this video, we'll be covering all of the new changes this patch, as well as provide you with a tier list for all 5 roles. It's gonna be a long one for me, but for you guys are probably just gonna skip to your roles, but I don't mind. Well, anyway, hit that sub button, and with all that being said, we'll start the video. Everybody loves skins, and that's exactly what we'll be starting with. We have several new skins this patch, beginning with Ruined Pantheon. A prestige skin, Ascended Pantheon, is also available to unlock. Some other new skins include Sentinel Diana, Irelia, Olaf, Riven, and Vayne. Make sure you check these out. They're a bit different than what we've been seeing in the past few patches. They're darker and give all these champions a completely new color palette as well as a design. Now let's talk about the balance changes. The first one that we'll be talking about are system buffs. Deadman's Plate was recently nerfed. After Riot decided to target the ever-growing issue of mobility creep, it was inevitable that this powerful item finally got some adjustments. Unfortunately, the changes were not neutral and made the item weaker than intended. Thus, it's receiving a small buff this patch to help it out. At the cost of some movement speed on the active, it received adjustments to increase its damage output. However, movement speed was what made this item so good, even if it was extremely cost inefficient. The item has had its armor increased from 40 to 45 this patch, so at the very least, there's less gold value lost when purchasing it. Next up, we have champion changes beginning with the top lane. Our first top lane change is for Nocturne. This isn't a mistake. The nerf specifically targets solo queue Nocturne, and you can also see that this is a mid lane nerf as well. In previous patches, we've seen OP junglers like Lee Sin and Viego make their way into the solo lanes. Simply overtuned, they're able to thrive in various roles, which isn't as bad as long as they're balanced. In those previous cases, as well as Nocturne's case, they're definitely on the stronger side. After massive changes to Stridebreaker, Nocturne's win rate popped off last patch and peaked at 55 to even 56% based on what rank you're looking at. The nerf this patch is that his passive healing will be reduced by 50% against lane minions. Running into an entire minion wave, face tanking it, and then healing it off with the passive was pretty obnoxious. I'm pretty glad that they made this change, but the fact remains that he's still a solid jungler. Considering how important sustain is in the top lane, we'll be keeping an eye on Nocturne. Although we'll be keeping him in the S tier, we do expect his win rate to drop significantly from its all-time high last patch. Stridebreaker changes were great for Nocturne, but Darius players had a completely different set of experience. Good, because that's what you get when you play Darius. He felt abysmally weak as he received balance changes based on his power with his old Stridebreaker. Without the mobility it previously granted, Darius fell off hard last patch, and that's why he's been buffed on this one. His passive bonus AD has been increased from 20 to 205 to 30 to 230, and his E's cooldown was lowered from 26 to 18 to 24 to 14. These were all basically reverts on previous nerfs that he received this season. These buffs are crucial, and we'll be moving him up to the A tier. If this sort of balance change scares you, definitely check out ProGuides.com and hit up one of our coaches, because I know I will be, because I'm terrified of commitment and Darius. Anyway, we have a bunch of excellent ones for all roles, and they'd love to help you learn how to approach specific matchups, and they can even help you with any fundamentals that you need to work on. Moving forward, Garen found himself in a very similar situation to Darius. He was also buffed this patch, but it was much more smaller than Darius's. Garen didn't suffer as much because he still has some mobility from his Q, which is coincidentally what was raised. His Q's movement speed bonus was increased from 30% to 35 to 45% based on ability level. Mobility is huge for any juggernaut, and we expect Garen to thrive in low elo this patch. We'll leave his placement untouched, but we'll definitely keep an eye out on him as the patch plays out. Irelia was also buffed this patch, and this time it wasn't some extra mana. Her movement speed was increased by 10, not the usual 5 that we're used to seeing. That's 2 tiers of movement speed that she's gone up from, and that puts Irelia at the top. Only Mini-Gnar at level 18, Elise in Spider Form, Master Yi, and Cassiopeia after level 6 can outrun her, or outslither her, or whatever Cass does. With such a high base movement speed, Irelia can punish mistakes harder than before and is also much more forgiving to play herself. More movement speed means that Irelia has a better chance of kiting you. There are situations where she's at 1 HP and just keeps running, and then turns around and heals up. Those are going to be even more frequent than before, and if you instead find yourself running from her, it's going to be much more difficult than before with her high movement speed. We moved her up to the A tier. Finally, we have Irelia. She's been a solid pick early game this season, but her power curve was rather unforgiving. As the game progressed, she quickly fell off, and to address this, Riot has given her some changes this patch. Her health has been lowered from 580 to 520, MR from 32 to 28, and HP per level from 95 to 110. Next, her passive stacks were lowered from 5 to 4, while bonus attack speed per stack has been changed from 8 to 16% based on level to 7.5 to 20%. Also, the damage was changed from 15 to 66 plus 25% bonus AD to 10 to 61 plus 30% bonus AD. Her Q's travel speed has been lowered significantly, and the damage to minions have been adjusted from 55 to 135 to 55 plus 12 per level. Her W's damage reduction has been changed from 50% physical to 40 to 80% physical and 20 to 40% magic damage. Also, the max damage has been raised from 20 to 140 plus 100% AD and 80% AP to 30 to 290 plus 150% and 120% AP. That's a huge buff, wow. Her E's travel time is now fixed at 0.25 seconds, cannot be cast during the Q animation, and can no longer be cast while CC'd. Finally, her ultimate reduces her Q's cooldown by 0.5, 1.5, or 2.5 seconds based on ability rank. Overall, this takes away power from Irelia's early game, but makes her much stronger in the later stages. And one last thing I'll mention is that Tahm Kench has been moved up to the B tier as a result of the changes that we'll be covering at the end of the video. In the top lane, we have Set and Camille in our OP tier. Dr. Mundo has been moved down for a small adjustment that we'll be going over in a little bit, and thus our S tier picks include Riven, Mordekaiser, Fiora, Nocturne, Jax, Sylas, Malphite, Gwen, Wukong, Urgot, Shen, and Mundo. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the jungle. Dr. Mundo has been adjusted this patch to help him thrive in the jungle. He's been a very weak jungler in spite of his great top lane performance after his rework. First, his level 1 attack speed has been increased from 0.67 to 0.72, but his ratio remains at 0.67. Next, his passive health regeneration has gone down from 2% to 1 to 2% based on level, and the passive cooldown has gone up from 45 to 15 seconds to 60 to 15 seconds. This is a bigger nerf to top lane Mundo, who relies more heavily on his passive to avoid ganks and even treat effectively. Next are some direct jungle buffs. Mundo's Q damage cap against monsters has gone up from 300 to 500 to 350 to 500. The ability will also fully refund health after striking a jungle monster. Finally, his E will deal 200% damage instead of 140% to monsters and will punt away the smaller monsters immediately. This definitely speeds up Mundo's clear, and we expect his win rate to rise as the patch plays out. Before we move forward, let me ask you our question of the day. In your opinion, who's the most underrated pick in the game? I personally think it's Kog'Maw, mostly because the huge changes from last patch. There's less backline access, and this actually puts a lot of marksmen in a good place. Let me know your answers in the comments down below. Now, let's get back to the changes. We have big changes for Irelia this patch. I've covered it in a previous video, and my throat hurt, and no, I'm not looking forward to doing it again. Anyway, first, her armor has been increased by 2, while her health regeneration per 5 is down from 9 to 7.5. Her passive includes a new effect. Irelia heals for 18 to 120 plus 1.5% AP health over the duration against large monsters. Against champions, the healing is higher at 19 to 189 plus 6% AP. Irelia only heals off of one monster at a time. The healing is also 33% effective against sources beyond the first. Also, the damage is going up from 5% of max health to 6% plus 1.5% for every 100 AP that Irelia has. The maximum number of stacks reduced from 5 to 4, and the movement speed per stack changed from 7 to 11% plus 1 for every 100 AP to 3 to 7 plus 3% for every 100 AP. The duration of the speed bonus was reduced from 5.5 to 5 seconds, and the stack fallout time increased from 1 to 1.5 seconds. Finally, the cooldown has gone up from 4 flat to 6 to 4 based on ability rank, and the damage has also increased from 30 to 90 to 35 to 95. Her W's damage is going up from 70 to 130 plus 30% AP to 70 to 150 plus 35% AP. Next, her E's cooldown has gone up from 12 to 8, while the slow has gone up from 25 to 45% to 40% flat. The damage was increased from 70 to 150 to 70 to 170. Her ultimate's AP ratio has increased from 30% to 40%, the sleep duration reduced from 2 to 3 seconds to 1.5 to 2.5 seconds, the drowsy slowdown from 25 to 10%, and the slow increase removed. This makes Irelia not only easier to use, but also stronger. She's lost power in places that made her shine in Elite as well as competitive play. With all these changes, it's hard to say where she'll end up or hard to say what the heck even happened, but we believe that she'll be moving up to the S tier as more players should be able to utilize her. Things are much more simpler with Shaco. He's a solo queue monster, and Riot is finally nerfing him for real. His HP was reduced from 587 to 560, and also his movement speed from 350 to 345. The HP nerf isn't huge, but it can change how 1v1s play out. The movement speed nerf is the bigger deal, however, especially since Shaco relies on picking up some early kills, and not being able to chase for that final hit in the early game can really change how things play out later. We'll be keeping him in the OP tier, but honestly, even with a small nerf, he could potentially drop down as the patch plays out. Xin Zhao has also been nerfed this patch. His W's cooldown has been raised from 12 to 6 seconds to 12 to 8 seconds. He's been insanely popular, almost taking the lead over Lee Sin this patch. While this nerf does make him weaker in the mid to late game, we think that he'll remain a solid top tier pick because of his insane early game pressure. Just like with Shaco, we'll be leaving him in the OP tier, but we'll be keeping an eye on him. Graves is up for another small buff. His AD has gone up from 66 to 68. Marksmen love these flat AD buffs, and it's only a matter of time before he makes a recovery. We'll leave his placement untouched for now, like me throughout all quarantine. Anyway, Ivern. Ivern was also buffed this patch. His ease shield was increased from 80 to 200 to 80 to 220. It's a straightforward buff, and there's also a recent buff to support items as well. With all of this, he's set up for success. We'll be leaving him in the A tier for now, simply because there are a lot of aggressive picks that can punish players who lock him in right now. Finally, we have a buff for Rek'Sai. After a massive nerf to Prowler's Claw, she saw a huge dip in her win rate. This patch, her unburrowed Q damage per hit was also increased from 20 to 40 to 21 to 45, while her burrowed Q damage went up from 60 to 180 to 60 to 200. It's a solid buff, especially at level 9 when she has the ability maxed. She performed poorly last patch after the nerf to her mythic item, and with this change, she should have a better run on 11.14. We moved her up to the A tier. Our OP picks are still Shaco and Xin Zhao this patch. Nocturne jungle remains relatively untouched, and he's a strong competitor to take either of their spots in our mid-patch update. Following them in the S tier are Lee Sin, Elise, Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, Diana, Zac, Kindred, Kayn, Viego, Kha'Zix, Nocturne, and Lilia. Next is the mid lane. The first nerf in the mid lane is for Akali. She's seeing a ton of play in high elo, and her ban rates have been on the rise. She received a huge quality of life nerf after this patch. Her Q is no longer castable during her E. Honestly, nerfing numbers is one thing, but nerfing playstyle is relatively unfun. That's just my personal opinion. Anyway, in addition, her ultimate damage is being reduced. The minimum damage was decreased from 75 to 200 to 60 to 200. The max damage from 225 to 645 to 180 to 600. These nerfs are huge, and while we are debating moving her into the S tier, this change will definitely put an end to that sentiment. Next we have Malzahar. He went off last patch. The price reduction on Liandry's was all that he needed to get going. Although he was already a solid low elo pick, he went ahead and claimed the win rates around 53% in high elo and just below 54% overall. This patch, his health was lower from 537 to 510, and his Q's AP ratio from 0.65 to 0.55. These are some small nerfs, and he'll without a doubt remain an S tier pick. A little less irritating to play against though, but still incredibly boring to play, that's for sure. Ziggs has finally had a chance to shine, but Riot has gone ahead and said no, you don't get to have fun. This nerf isn't huge, but it'll hurt him in the early game for sure. His mana was reduced from 480 to 420. 420, nice. By the time you finish your first item, this nerf will basically become irrelevant, but it can easily affect how you play and get your first recall. Ziggs' biggest strength at the moment is that he flexes into the bottom lane as well, where he's finding a ton of success and getting a lot of wins. Finally, Seraphine was buffed this patch. Is she a mid laner? I don't know anymore. You tell me Riot because they admittedly want her to be one. Her Q's damage has gone up from 55 to 115 plus 40 to 60% AP to 60 to 120 plus 45 to 65% AP. While she's not as popular as before, this buff should definitely help her out as both a mid laner and support. We'll be leaving her placement untouched, however. All of these changes have led to no changes on the list, but we do have one thing to mention. Nocturne is down from the S to the A tier after the nerf. In the top lane, he's able to brawl and use his high damage output and still win in extended fights. As a mid laner, however, the loss of sustain makes it much more feasible to poke at him from a distance. He's lost a huge chunk of that healing, and bullying him around should be a little bit more realistic, especially before he hits level 6. This is the only time I'll be condoning bullying. Our OP picks in the mid lane are Zed, Katarina, and Sylas, followed by Talon, Annie, Fizz, Kiana, Diana, Ahri, Yone, LeBlanc, Kassadin, Anivia, Vladimir, Yasuo, and Malzahar in the S tier. Next we have the bottom lane. Unfortunately, there aren't any balance changes to cover in the bottom lane. The meta has been pretty much set for this upcoming patch, so we'll go ahead and just give you a couple of updates. Ezreal's win rate has dropped about 1.5% last patch after the nerfs to Divine Sunderer. In spite of this, he remains a popular pick because he's consistent and safe. There's no doubt that he's still a top tier pick, but definitely has been less broken than before. While he wasn't touched this patch, Kog'Maw is still an upcoming pick. We've mentioned him before in previous videos, and he's finally gaining some steam. This is a hot take for sure, but our analysts want to move him up to the S tier. His pick rate has slowly been on the climb, and with the reduction to mobility creep, he has a much more easier time surviving and leading his team's damage charts. Our OP picks for this patch are Samira and Ezreal, followed up by Jinx, Kai'Sa, Ashe, Vayne, Jhin, Ziggs, Tristana, Draven, and Kog'Maw in the S tier. Finally, we'll be concluding with supports. Kicking off supports is a nerf to Karma. Her base AD is going down from 54 to 51. Recently, Karma has been gaining a lot of popularity in high elo. Following a dominant early game, Karma can easily scale up and become one of their team's most impactful members. Although her win rate is quite low, players default to her because she's a rewarding and powerful pick in lane especially. This is a big change from early on in the season where she was practically garbage, but buff a champion enough and they're obviously playable eventually. We'll be leaving her replacement untouched. This AD nerf will definitely affect her as a flex pick and during the laning phase, but it's not enough to drop her down. Taric got a buff on the other hand. His Q's mana cost was reduced from 70 to 90 to 65 to 85, and his E mana cost down from 60 to 40. Since you don't always get to build mana on Taric, it's a great change, especially later on into the game. It really sucks when you run out of C mid-fight as any character, but at least a ton of top laners and marksmen can still deal damage even without any mana left. It's definitely a nice buff, and Taric will likely push the 50% win rate mark this patch. We'll be leaving his placement untouched, but we'll continue to keep an eye out. Finally, we have a change for Tahm Kench. His passive damage was increased from 2.5% max HP to 12 to 60 plus 2.5% bonus HP. This is a huge buff in basically every scenario. Also, his Q will apply damage from an acquired taste. Another change for his Q is the healing. It's been adjusted from 6 to 10% of his missing HP to 15 to 35 plus 4 to 6% of his missing HP. In this case, it's an early game buff, but a nerf in the late game. Next, his W was bug fixed. The cooldown refund will properly scale with ability haste, and the refund on the mana and cooldown has been increased from 30 to 40% if he hits at least one enemy champion. Finally, his ultimate cast on allies was also buffed. The shield value has gone up from 300 to 600 to 400 to 600, and his self-slow when eating an ally went down from 40 to 10% to 30 to 10%. After a poor performance after the rework, this buff should hopefully help him get some extra fighting power as both a support and a top laner. We'll be leaving his placement untouched as well, but keep track of them as the patch plays out. This is the only catfishing that I approve of. Our OP support picks are Leona, Thresh, and Lulu, followed up by Morgana, Nautilus, Blitzcrank, Maokai, Zyra, Senna, and Yuumi in the S tier. That'll be concluding our patch rundown, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below. Also, make sure to read the description. We have a link to join our Discord, and you don't want to miss out. We've got a great community, and also, you can be the first to know about any future giveaways that we hold. Best of luck, Summoner, and as usual, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.